Nick Rees, I want to start, if I can, with the issue in relation to Ken Wyatt. Allegations of bullying by a former Chief of Staff in his office, something like 18 staff resignations over a period of time when he was in the outer ministry. After the election, he's now been put into the cabinet. But there are talks in the media that he was threatening to resign, leave the Liberal Party and run with Labor. How fetting him to think that is?
Well, look, I think the most serious issue here is the allegations of a culture of bullying going on in Ken Wyatt's office, and the Chief of Staff who's made these complaints, Kate Johnson, you know, she's not some Johnny-come-lately to the Liberal Party. She's a very experienced staffer, a very experienced political operative, clearly someone who's been toughened by many years in the political cauldron, and she was clearly shocked by what she found in Ken Wyatt's office, and the 18 staff resigning, the hundreds of items of correspondence which were not being responded to. It showed that it was obviously a very poorly run office, and there was very bad things happening in there. But probably the saddest thing about all this is that when she raised these concerns with the Prime Minister's office, when she was a whistleblower, if you like, she ended up getting sacked. And that's exactly the sort of thing we need to stop from happening in Australian workplaces.
Yeah, Prue, it's alleged that she raised all these concerns with Malcolm Turnbull's office. Malcolm Turnbull himself was back in the media on Thursday in Sydney. There was an event to farewell him. Well, I think it was a Liberal Party forum for something else, but it was unofficially his farewell. There were 250-odd people there, including Christopher Pyne, a number of current frontbenchers like Paul Fletcher and Trent Zimmerman. But Malcolm Turnbull pointedly discussed climate change yet again. Let's not forget he voted for Kevin Rudd's emissions trading scheme. It's been the defining policy issue of his time in politics, but he said Australians need to be noisy Australians, Liberals in particular, moderate Liberals, not quiet Australians. Was that a pointed reference to the Prime Minister, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he's still seething over the fact that he was kicked out, even though he brought it all about, as we all know. You know, I find it so hypocritical of Malcolm yet again. You know, he talked about the ghosts of previous Prime Ministers and how they should be, you know, just silent. And, you know, he and his son have had a campaign going on for ever since he was ousted. And, you know, I just think he should shut up. You know, we talk about you know, the sore losers. Malcolm has always been deluded about his pontifications, and it's very sad and pathetic to see him acting in this way, I believe.
Yeah, interestingly, still on the energy issues, Nick, there's a parliamentary inquiry in relation to nuclear energy. Lou O'Brien is the government member who is chairing this inquiry. He's saying there's a bit of a turnaround in the community about nuclear power. Now, does that surprise you?
Look, the mining industry and others have been running a pretty concerted campaign to elevate the standing of nuclear power, and look, it doesn't surprise me that may have had some impact. I see that 40% of people are now comfortable with nuclear power in Australia, although of course that still leaves 60% of people who don't want it, who are unsure, or you know, just don't know. So I still think there's a bit of a way to go there. But of course, the problem with nuclear power is it just costs so much to produce electricity that way. Far more expensive than coal, far more expensive than solar and other renewables. So the only way you'll ever see nuclear power in this country is with a very, very big carbon price. Is that something you'd support?
Nick Rees, I mean, I listened carefully to Bill Shorten in the campaign, and he talked about the cost of inaction. The cost of inaction is pretty important, Prue. Why don't we factor in the cost of inaction?
Exactly. And, you know, I mean, all these myths about and scaremongering about nuclear power, you know, I mean, it's in 31 countries. It's going to be reliable. It's cheaper. It is actually cheaper to produce. So I don't know where you're getting that from. Its emissions are less. I mean, it's a no-brainer. And there were about 26% of those people who were surveyed who are just unsure. And once people understand what the implications are and how reliable it is and how it's going to bring new energy prices down, I'm sure that 40% will rise to 60 or 70%. You know, for too long there's been scaremongering, heads in the sand about nuclear, and it's time to address it and, you know, stop mucking around.
Well, I mean, we can have a debate about the safety of nuclear power, and I think there is some hysteria around that. I agree on that front. But you can't really debate the price. Nuclear power is a very, very expensive form of electricity.
It's expensive,
far more
Nick,
expensive than other sources available. And you only get it with a big fat carbon price.
If our submarines end up nuclear, and I think they should, then it will, you know, provide scale to any nuclear industry in this country, both for nuclear power and nuclear submarines, and all the sustainment work that would go into nuclear power stations and submarines is a good thing. We want people to do maths and science and physics. There you go. It's the jobs of the future. And Nick, Movember's over. We've got to get rid of the little, you know, caterpillar. Anyway, I've got to leave it there. I got to leave it there. Nick Rees, Prue MacSween, thanks very much for your time.
Thanks,
tonight.
Peter.
Thanks, Peter.